What's going on, guys? Today we're going to be removing the exhaust manifolds off of the cylinder head. Now there are lots of reasons you'd be doing this, swapping headers, replacing one, pulling the cylinder head. Anyway, this is definitely one of the easier jobs of replacing a cylinder head. This is why I'm doing it today. We're pulling the head. It's one of the easier jobs, but it's one of the more difficult jobs in the sense that it's kind of a pain to do. The angle of which the bolts are in kind of makes it a little bit of a pain in the ass to get it off. It's not hard work, it's tedious work. There's a lot of bolts down there you have to pull off, and they're all at a weird angle. So if you notice, I have the valve cover and the cooling system removed. You do not have to have either of those off to remove the headers. Having the valve cover off though does give you a little bit more room to work back there. So if you can't get it off with the valve cover on, you might want to consider pulling the valve cover to get it off a little bit easier. But then that might cause its own problems, like resealing the valve cover. Tools we will be using: flathead screwdriver, 3/8 drive ratchet, 3/8 short extension, 10mm socket, 11mm short socket, 11mm long socket. These are all the tools you will need to do this job. That being said, it will be quicker and easier with an electric air ratchet or a pneumatic air ratchet. These make the job a lot quicker. We have a lot of bolts we're going to be taking off with the 11mm, kind of in a not so great position, which sort of makes it hard, and it's very tedious with a 3/8 drive, but if this is all you have, you can absolutely do this job. It just takes a little bit longer. The first thing we're going to have to remove here is the secondary air pump system for the OBD2 cars. If you have an OBD1, so 95 or older, you don't even have to deal with this. This is just mainly for OBD2 cars with the stock headers. If you have custom headers, there's a chance that this probably isn't here. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to pull the vacuum line off, just like that. That guy comes off. And then this is a secondary air pump right here, and that hose from the back of that right here. So we're just going to hit this guy with a flathead. And then he pops off right there. So now we got to take this guy off. So to do that, we're going to use a 10mm socket. I like to use a short little 3/8 extension here. And there's two of them. There's one here, and there's one underneath right next to it. There's one. And then this guy just sort of comes off just like that. The best way to not lose these bolts is to just screw them right back on. Okay, so now before we start taking the headers off, we have to pull this section off right here that has this guy on it. Now, so you can see where the support bracket is right here. It sort of comes off and down in there. You have to take those guys off first. You will see that it has two bolts connecting it, one there. So there's one of those on the bottom of this rail right here, and the same on this rail right up here. One thing to note is some of the bolts will come off with the threads in them, and others will just come off just as the nut. They'll sort of vary between each one. Some of them will go without a nut, some of them will go with the thread. So if it comes out with a thread, don't be alarmed, don't be freaked out. You just basically, it's just a thing that happens. Same thing with the bolts, they just come off. Sometimes they'll have threads, sometimes they won't. So basically from here on out, we're just going to be using an 11mm deep well socket to get basically everything else off. So like stated, we need to get the bolts to those guys off first, and there are 6 of them. The easiest way to find them is to just stick your head down there, flashlight, find them, and hook your wrench up to them. So now this is where the job starts to get a little bit more tedious in the sense of positioning your wrenches and choosing how you want to go at it. So I broke it with a driver, and now I'm just unscrewing it by hand. These back view exhaust bolts are kind of the worst. So now we have this guy off. You can come out like that, and now I can sort of get a better view of clip of the two exhausts of where it bolts up to the manifold. We can sort of get a better view of what it looks like underneath. So you'll have 4 bolts, one here, one here, one here, and one here, and they sort of sit diagonal. This is on the first bank of headers. This is on the second bank of headers. So this one sits between cylinders 2 and 3, and this sits between, I believe, 4 and 5. And then this sits on the side of cylinder 1. So you can sort of use that as a reference to see where all of these are plugged in, but these guys need to come off in order to get the rest of the heads off. So here's where it starts to get a little bit more difficult. So basically now from here all we have to do is unbolt the rest of the bolts and the header should come off. That's a lot harder than it sounds due to the orientation of the headers. You can use a 3/8 driver with an extension or a different combination of them. Sometimes I'll use a deep well with an extension. You might use just a deep well, you know, so a different combination of wrenches definitely helps. If you have an air ratchet, it makes the job a lot quicker. You can do it just using this, but it's really tedious and it might take a while. Or you can use an air ratchet like this. I actually have a battery powered one. Makes the job a lot quicker, but basically all we have to do now is just take all the rest of the bolts out, as simple as that sounds. So yeah, so that back one there is too deep for me to get with the air ratchet, so I gotta do him by hand. And that's just an example of what I mean. Some will be easier to get than others, and some of them will just outright be a pain. So when you think you have all of them done, just one last thing is to just feel where all the bolts are, or where they should be, to see if you actually got all of them or just like missed one, you know, in case they don't come off. And then basically from here we're just going to pull down and out on the headers, and they should just come right off. And it'll just come right off and hang off to the side just like that. And that's it. Our exhaust manifolds are off. Thank you guys so much for watching. Keep it fresh, and I'll see you guys later.